Good evening, everybody. Well, welcome to Somerset House is how I usually start any kind of talks, but it's a bit different, kind of not introducing other people and actually speaking myself. So please bear with me. Let's see. So I dug up these images that I actually think are from the Courtyard archive, and this is Somerset House just before 2000, when, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar already, but Somerset House started off as it wasn't always a car park, but 80s, 90s, obviously, this is where a lot of the staff from the Inland Revenue and various other government offices park their Volvos, which I love to tell people about. I don't know if they're as interested as I am. Lots of car park. And the background of, I work for Somerset House Trust, and we look after the building, and our role is to open it up for public benefit. So today it's an art centre that obviously has a huge public programme of exhibitions and events and talks and education programmes and all kinds of things. And it's also office space and studio space for about 2,500 artists, designers, makers, and people working within creative organisations. So the Courtyard was transformed into the Edmund Jaffra Fountain Court in 2001, and it's where we have a lot of our programming, and it's also just where a lot of people in London come to enjoy some time in the summer with their children or have a drink after work. I am currently deinstalling the installation in the Courtyard, which you might have seen over the last couple of weeks, actually the last week, and it's installation by an artist called Michael Pinsky, and it's made up of 5 geodesic domes that each contain the artist's impression of pollution in different cities internationally. It's been on the news quite a lot, but it's part of, a lot of my research and interests are specifically about sustainability and environmental related programming. So I suppose it's just kind of like one example of how we're kind of trying to do more with that space generally in terms of sculpture and programming. There's a couple of pictures. This was part of our Earth Day program, which was last Sunday, which is like a worldwide, like the biggest environmental event. Last year we had John Gerard's, Western Flag, which was a collaboration with Channel 4. This is a project that we've got coming up, which is a commission of a British-Korean artist duo called Kimchi and Chips, and essentially it's going to be 200 mirrors filling the Courtyard, and it's a art installation kind of responding to the power of the sun as a natural resource, and a futuristic sculpture of 200 mirrors. So that's coming up in June. And I suppose all of these are kind of like just building in ways that we're kind of trying to use the building as a basically not a car park, but completely like taking it away from the bureaucratic history and making it a space for kind of art and enjoyment. So sustainability, I suppose, is a theme of a lot of our projects recently, and particularly the ones that I've been involved with. One that's much more subtle than kind of doing massive things in the Courtyard is a project called Audible Utopia, which is a 3-year educational project, which essentially is artists and makers taking over hidden spaces around Somerset House and starting small-scale growing projects that we're inviting different community groups and residents to get involved with. They include like taking the coffee grounds from some of the cafes and restaurants and growing mushrooms beneath the Courtyard in some of the kind of coal holes and various things. So that's kind of like a very small scale project, but I suppose it's a different take on how artists are using the site. I was very heavily involved with Utopia 2016, which we worked with the Courtyard and King's College with. For the first time, we commissioned a flag for the building, and this is a Jeremy Deller flag, which flew above the side for a whole year. And I suppose one thing that we struggle with a lot is the kind of architectural facade of the site. You might find that at the Courtyard as well. It's a lot of people still think it's an office block or it's a palace or it's this impenetrable building that is not for everyday people. So by kind of creating large-scale interventions, flags and various things that are kind of like visible from the exterior, that's kind of one thing that we're thinking about quite a lot. Utopia was very fun. I miss it a lot, and there's some people in this room that I worked with on that. When I started in 2013, one thing that struck me was how much of the building was still quite derelict and underused. This is the old Inland Revenue Post Office as it was in 2013. And I made lots of friends who were essentially designers wandering around who had been given a pass to this old post room, and they essentially just got lots of family and friends in and started painting it and started creating a makerspace. That makerspace today is filled with 90 different design and digital manufacturing studios. Many of them are doing really kind of innovative thing. Lots of them are doing work related to the environment, which I'm specifically interested in. So that was 2013. I'll come back to that. 2013, 2014, there's all these kind of strange things happening on site. This is a picture of PJ Harvey's music studio, which also kind of was in the basement down in Newing, and was an Art Angel co-commission, which you might have heard of. And in 2015, we opened the doors to the new wing, which is where some of the Courtyard offices are based, for the first time to public, because that bit of the site had never been opened before. And Somerset House Studios was launched. And there's now, I had to double check with colleagues, but there's 83 different artists on essentially long-term residencies in the mid-basement and basement of Somerset House, together with all the kind of makerversity makers and designers. So that's about 300 artists and makers altogether. And they have the most amazing studio spaces. This is Gareth Pugh, who's a fashion designer you might have heard of. He's based just underneath Waterloo Bridge and has one of these kind of crazy vault spaces. Some of these spaces are shared between 2, 3, 4 different artists, practitioners. Some of them are kind of solo studios. But I'm really sorry that they're not open to the public, because they're just the most fascinating places to walk around. This is the old Inland Revenue rifle range, which I've no idea why the Inland Revenue needed a rifle range, but it's a fascinating space. At the moment it's occupied by a musician called Lone Lady, which apparently is just the kind of perfect architectural space for the kind of sound and music that she's making. This is going back to Makerversity. This is a space just underneath Waterloo Bridge, on the kind of the basement, which is just off this is where lots of the Makerversity workshops and spaces are. So just, they've transformed all that bit of the building from, if you kind of think of the Inland Revenue post room in 2013, the earlier picture, and it's a really kind of vibey community. This is the old Inland Revenue, it's just next to the gym, which again, why do the Inland Revenue need a gym in the building? I'm not quite sure. But now it's, I think there's about 30 individuals based in this space, but they're all kind of critical and speculative design studios of different sorts. And Somerset House Studios, if you haven't heard much about it, there's a public program that accompanies the artists in residence, and is generated from their kind of work in progress. And sometimes that ends up being raves just underneath the courtyard space, led by different kind of musicians or people kind of like testing out different formats of activity. But that's our kind of the most experimental side of our public program. This is some of the social spaces that the artists use. So this is the kind of the leftover billiards from the Inland Revenue, etc. This is actually something we worked on this project. This is a design studio called Workflow, running a project, an educational project with young people, which I think the Courtyard was involved with as well. And something that I commissioned at the end of last year was the design of one of our main entrances, which is just off the Great Arch, the Victoria Embankment entrance. And I was talking to one of the artists based in the studios who's called Chloe Lamford. She's a theatre practitioner who's quite well known for shows at the Royal Court and various places like that. And she was just fascinated by the architectural style of the building. And we talked a lot about how no one really understands where you are at any one point. It's so complex. So essentially, this installation is it's a play on the building itself. So she's taken, this is kind of the west wing facade, and that's like a balustrade from the middle of the courtyard. And she's created a set of Somerset House, but within an indoor space. And part of that is to try and kind of like break down the architectural facade and invite people in to occupy and to perform and to use the space as their own. And yeah. I suppose that's it from me. Thank you very much.